I guess I'll begin with a few images to orient the discussion. I want to talk about belonging and the public realm, or we'll discuss the subject. I have a few images of institutional buildings, each one an opportunity to expand the public realm, and each also in a sense of belonging, uniquely designed that grows out of the circumstances, the culture, the program of the place. Salt Lake City Library at the heart of downtown has a roof garden, which is a park for the public. They can access it through this ramped walkway without even entering the library. It has grounds around it all designed for great public gatherings, performances, which you see here. And it's got a new invention, an urban room, a place which is of the library, but also of the city. It's open 18 hours a day. It has all kinds of gatherings and programming. It's an extension of the city. In Vancouver, a library that preceded Salt Lake, where the idea of the urban room first was born. Also, we proposed a roof park, a reading garden. They said, oh, we can't do that. We have too much drugs around here. 20 years later, after we opened it, they came back and they said, we want that reading garden. So there it is, the reading garden, which was implemented later, and the urban room with its many activities. Performing Arts Center, the Kaufman Performing Center in Kansas City, again, an opportunity to really expand the public realm, a lobby that's part of the city, filled with activities, both for performances, but just the citizens at large. And in Jerusalem, a bridge between all the communities, all of them gathering from all directions of the city, the only place in the city, the Mamilla Center, where everybody gathers, shops, celebrates, dances. National Gallery of Canada, again, an extension of the city into the building, a great hall and gardens, all part of the city at large. And in Singapore, a very large complex that fulfills the idea of the Urban Renewal Authority, a great agency that is devoted to enhancing the public realm, to make the waterfront the most active place continuously around the bay, which you see here with the thousands of people enjoying the city. And finally, trying to demonstrate that the public realm can be everywhere, even in an airport, and you can integrate parks and shopping and gardens, a place of great gathering and celebrations that attracts hundreds of thousands of people every week.
Well, first, just thank you to everybody at Mass for organizing such a wonderful gathering of people who are smart and already committed to this work. Moshe and I have been talking about public space for, 15 years at least. And he really introduced me the first time to this thinking as I was looking at the urban rooms that had been designed as part of these libraries, in particular at Salt Lake. I guess that's the one that stands out in my mind most. But I think the notion that a space that is inspiring, not just a place that keeps you warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and that the roofs are, tight, the books are not getting wet when it rains. That's such a sort of bare minimum. And unfortunately, so many of the libraries were built just sort of with that in mind as a way to get service into every neighborhood in the community. So it was a great start. But the mission that we're trying to reach at Brooklyn Public Library is how to build spaces that elevate not only the community, but the individuals as well. So people can do their best thinking and their best work, and that the community as a whole is proud of the library that's in their neighborhood. And so I think especially since COVID, neighborhoods changed, people's relationships with each other's changed. There was sort of a groundswell of this notion that everybody belonged in a library, and sort of homemade signs started to crop up about that. And we embraced it fully. But the real sort of pinnacle of all this work is, in fact, the New Lots Library that we just saw a video about, a place that's been neglected, and a place where we can make a really huge difference by not only providing all the services we provide, literacy-based, but by providing this beacon and a memorial to some of the unfortunate historical moments in those on those streets. So I guess before I turn it over to Moshe, I would say that um, building space that elevates the community at large, individuals, and also all of us who work in the buildings is really a critical part of the mission of the library. And it has to be done in a way that is tangible and real. And funny for me to say this, somebody who's so committed to words, but not just talk.
Well, we've been at it. I think the question, first of all, I would say, what makes a building belong? Uh, I think it begins with the site, really deciphering the secrets of the site, as I like to call it, to understand the program, to immerse yourself in the program. If it's a school, what's a wonderful place for learning, for students, for the faculty. If it's a library, how do you make it feel inviting, open, uh, I'd say seductive? How do you create spaces for large groups and small groups to gather, to work? How do you choose materials? What's the impact of the culture of the place? Our practice is across many cultures. When we did the Museum of the Sikhs in the Punjab, spent a lot of time learning about Sikhism. That was not a culture that I knew. And the proof of the success is in the way that it was possessed by the people of the Punjab once it was built. The ultimate test of belonging is in the embrace of the users.
Yeah.
Not in what the architect has in mind, not what he thinks they should think, but what they feel about their building.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it sort of is at the root of the work that we're doing. We always have really comprehensive sessions with community members before we even start to listen to what our patrons want in their library. And then to figure out how to translate that into the buildings that we're building or the renovations that we're doing. That's definitely step one. The other critical thing, and I haven't heard that much about it today, but it's a big challenge to embark on a project that is um, encouraging belonging, uh, inspiration, all the things we're striving to do today, but to think about the fact that that building is going to be providing services for another 100 and some years. And we know that because we have 18 Carnegie libraries in our system that were built about 130 years ago that we're still operating and trying to take good care of because they're important architecturally and historically. But how do you think about a building today, given what we know about the technological changes that have changed the way that we consume information, and what will it look like 50, 100 years from now? What will technology bring? And so this mantra of flexibility is part of what we talk about, how to build spaces that are hospitable to the ways people are learning and working today, but will also be able to be used in the future.
I think that the connection between the public realm and cultural buildings is profound because we come from a culture where most public buildings were kind of set back, intimidating. Think of the National Gallery in Washington that was built, I guess, in the 30s. I'm talking about the original structure. It's opaque. You can't see into the building. It has powerful colonnades. I think that's true of libraries. The Free Library in Philadelphia is such a building. It sits on a great big circle. but it's intimidating, it's opaque again. The question is, how do we transform that in the 21st
Yeah.
century? How do we, not, I don't mean transform those buildings, but how do, when we design new institutions, devise those, I'd call them elements of design which create transparency, which create a sense of invitation to enter, which tells you of the life going on in the building from the city and vice versa. Uh, when we designed the National Gallery of Canada, we had two alternative schemes. One was quite an opaque building. You circulated within. The gallery faced the city, which had opaque walls, and then the Great Hall. This is one of the buildings I showed. The other alternative was called the extrovert version, totally glass fronted, the walkway up and into the Great Hall, totally open to the city. It's like an open book. We had to present these to the cabinet, and I remember the prime minister saying, "This is a cold city. We're a new generation of people. Extrovert it will be, and transform the city as it became kind of a gathering space well beyond the function of a national gallery."
So, this thing about intimidating public buildings is very real. At the Central Library in Brooklyn, which sits on Grand Army Plaza, Prospect Park is on one side, the Brooklyn Botanic Garden is on the other, and it is majestic. But if you are, new to this country, if you're concerned about your status here, um, your economic uh, status, as well as your immigration status, it is a very intimidating building to walk in. And so we're working on renovations as well as new projects and trying to figure out how to make them more inviting. Some of that is really difficult. And I think as important as architecture is to all of these initiatives, it's really the programming also. And I said earlier, you have to do more than just talk the talk. We really are building programs that are speaking the message. It's better to see a program about Jay-Z than to hear a middle-aged white woman talking about the fact that everybody belongs in the building. And so, so we've really focused on programs all over the borough because Brooklyn is a very, very diverse place. We provide services in over 100 languages. We do story time in 30 different languages. And so the trick is to figure out what belongs in which library and how to make those libraries really feel like a place for the very people who live nearby, as well as a place where people of all generations can rub shoulders with each other regardless of their backgrounds. And it's really one of the things we talk about is really recreating in an urban environment the town square where people can just really sit down and learn about their neighbors.
I think what I would add to this is, what are the subtle elements that make a space work? Whether it's a urban piazza in front of the Brooklyn Library, whether it's a street arrangement, what are the things to be sensitive to? Plant life, trees, the quality of light. Where does the sun come from? What is shaded and what is unprotected, and how much protection from the elements to provide, and what happens at winter, and what happens at summer, and what happens in between. And whether you're in a building that faces a public space or whether you're actually designing the public space, these subtle elements are amazing. You walk around European cities and you see a little cafe here, and you see another one on the other side. One is filled with people, the other one is empty.
Yeah.
And you then start realizing this one is on the south side, it's got a shade, it's got some light, this has a beautiful tree next to it. And so I think this is, I could call it almost the science of what makes a place uplifting and habitable and attractive versus one that is wanting. And at the end, it's to me always light when you're in the building, daylight. I think every space in the building should have daylight. Every working space where people spend 8 hours a day, every office building should have no one working without daylight. It's just
Yeah.
the element of life that since we invented air conditioning, architects have been denying to the public at large.
Well, I couldn't agree more about the light issue. I am working right now in a cubicle that has absolutely no natural light. So I know what it feels like, but that's okay. It's like the cobbler whose kids don't have shoes. I want to make sure everybody else has light. And I, first of all, thank you for all that I've learned from you over these years about a lot of these issues. But really, uh, in terms of elevating the communities that we serve, I think at the root of it is um, the people who care enough about their neighborhoods to really listen. I said this earlier, but there's nothing like a member of the community to learn about what that community needs. As expert as we all think we might be, because we've done it before, because we're consulting with the foremost experts in the country on these issues, it is really critical to pay attention to what we're hearing on the streets.
What do you think of community consultation? How has it worked for you?
Yeah, it's a challenge because once you give everybody the opportunity to tell you what they want, you have to decide what you can deliver because there's just no way to deliver it all. And so I think it's important that people feel like they're being heard. A local in Brooklyn, the local elected officials are very heavy-handed in this regard in a way that's good. They're doing their jobs, and then it's our job to kind of come up with a scheme that satisfies as many people as we can, but always staying true to who we are. So New Lots is a great example of this, where there were elected officials in the community who wanted a museum as part of the library. There were people who wanted all kinds of things that really aren't connected to literacy or to what the mission of the library is. And so it took some time and some creativity to decide what to keep, what not to keep, and how to present it in a way that everybody felt good about where we landed. And I will say that one of the most challenging people that we were dealing with, an elected official who had been in the community for at least 50 years, and very powerful there. When he saw a rendering, in fact, the renderings that you saw earlier today, he dropped the water bottle that he was holding because he was so overwhelmed by what we had presented. We promised to deliver a beacon in the neighborhood, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
We've devised a mechanism for flushing this out. The programs that you get from the client, mostly these are quantitative. We need 5 classrooms,
Yeah, we have that
such and
too.
such a
So a
size,
community room that has certain amount of
community,
seats in it. Yeah.
and very flexible. You can divide it to 16
Yeah.
rooms. You can have one big room, and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. Very, very rarely is there a qualitative statement about it. So what we have been doing in these circumstances is creating a qualitative program. So we say, yes, 5 classrooms. They should have daylight. They should be open. They should, to the view, the sun should not penetrate, but there should be gentle light. When we go through the building, just talking about qualitative issues, materials, character, and then we present that to the client. And then so we have 2 programs, qualitative and quantitative. When we start merging those, there's a chance that something good will come out of it.
Yeah.
At least it creates a discussion about what's important.
Yeah, the discussion is really important. I think rolling up your sleeves with somebody before it's fully baked is a really important gesture. And in New Lots in particular, there was a lot of concern about the site and the sanctity of the site, the fact that it was possible that people had been buried there. And the real issue was, we have a pretty substantial pot of money that we're working with. How much of it do you want to spend on history and archaeology versus what you want to spend to build to uplift the community today and for years in the future? And it's not hard, actually, as it turned out, to make a really persuasive argument about, what the money could do for time immeasurable.
Well, we're having fun with one little restoration.
Yeah, Moshe and I are working on a project in the very oldest library in Brooklyn, the oldest existing library in Brooklyn. I think there was one or two that got knocked down along the way, but a Carnegie Library in the midst of a bustling area at 4th and Pacific, which is right, for those of you who know New York, right near the Barclays Center and a lot of big hulking buildings. And it's the library that needs the most love, and we're doing that, right? We're creating a whole new.
What's interesting is as you look at the original plans and photographs of the original building, you then see 100 years of abuse. And all we're doing
Yeah.
is going back to what they had done 100 years ago, which was quite
Yeah.
wonderful.
I mean, when you're working in old buildings, it's really true. Neglect is actually a great thing. It's the interventions that can sometimes really muck things up, right? And this building is a perfect example of that. I mean, fluorescent lights in, circular shapes and all kinds of really nutty things. But it probably wasn't a great building to begin with, right? I mean, we're going to
Yeah,
make it great.
elegant building.